Thank you for the big round of applause or lack thereof. It's okay. I thought there was a slight chance we weren't going to do this when the alarm went off and everybody was going to clear out and we are going to be like, better luck next year.
Yep.
But no, here we are. So I think they just mentioned this is the Kimberly-Clark hour. So we're excited to take you down that path. We're also cognizant of not exactly stealing the content for the next 30 minutes. So Rachel and our attempt here is to take you a little bit into the weeds. Yep. And we're going to do that a little tactical, but hopefully you guys will hang in there. And if it seems like we're dragging it all, feel free to bring up a cup of coffee. Certainly could use it post lunch myself. So Rachel.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about what you do at Kimberly-Clark.
Yes. So thanks so much for having us, guys. So I've been with Kimberly-Clark for about a year. Before Kimberly-Clark, I was at Nestle in a similar role for about 4 years, and also worked on the agency side, ad tech side. So I've run the gamut a little bit, but pretty much what I do is a combination of pairing together technology, processes, and people setup, mainly through the advertising technology lens, to bring it to life in a smarter way and bring greater efficiencies and effectiveness across the board. But in doing so, I am essentially influencing without authority. So, really working with internal and external stakeholders to enable things to happen through that lens.
Influencing without authority. Nice. Sounds
Yes.
like salesmanship to a certain extent.
Indeed.
Internally.
Indeed.
So is it fair to say what you did at Nestle is not so dissimilar from the work you're doing at Kimberly-Clark?
I would say in many ways, it is similar, but it's also different. So one of my favorite things about working in my current role is that Nestle, we had over 2,000 brands. I was working with over 100 countries. I was working with global, regional, and local stakeholders across 13 different sectors. And at Kimberly-Clark, we have much fewer brands, but they're still very iconic. And what this lets me do is really, instead of exclusively sticking to the building the strategy part and building the operations and conducting RFPs to select the best technology for the company, I get to pull it through activation. And we have a great partnership on the global side with the US teams. It helps that we're in the same time zone, but we have a wonderful partnership, and we partner to really take the strategy and bring it through to activation and take, what we're trying to do, make sure and validate that it works through activating it by a campaign, figuring out what the challenges are, what the obstacles, and then bringing those back through into strategy to reframe the strategy.
Okay. So one of the perks, or I think interesting things about being in your role, global capacity, you have exposure to what the rest of the world is obviously doing. I think recently you presented presumably a keynote, really big presentation to the Programmatic Summit in Australia.
And it was NSYNC themed, so you guys missed out.
Perfect. What were kind of some of the common themes going on in that market? How similar is it to what we're all talking about in the room today? Just out of curiosity.
So I would say the themes are very similar. Australia wishes they weren't an island. They wish they had a closer time zone to the US because it's similar in many ways to the US and UK. They are working through future-proofing their strategy with cookieless. They're working through the rapid growth of retail and advanced TV. They're working through attention metrics and how can you use attention metrics to correlate with business results. And they're working through transparency and what does that mean and how to bring it to life throughout various different entities and organizations.
Okay. So transparency, right, is a word that maybe has lost meaning to a certain extent because it's used so frequently, especially in your space. Being the kind of global lead there, how are you encouraging your people, the different regions to be thinking about it? Unpack it a little bit. What does it mean to you guys?
So I would say one of the biggest things I learned at Nestle is that it's so important to align objectives, and it's important to align what do you mean when you're asking for something? So if we think through the transparency lens, it's a complete buzzword. You're right. And it's used in so many conferences and so many conversations and so many articles, but it means different things to different people. It could mean how are decisions getting made? So if you're a client or if you are talking to your CMO and they're saying, I want transparency into this, or you're saying, I want transparency into this, what does that mean? It could be that you want to understand from your agency, how are they taking decisions in relation to technology? How are they deciding what DSP to use? It could mean, how are they deciding when to use a technology like DCO? Or it could mean, what is the financial breakdown of your programmatic operations? And if you dig into that, that could mean a whole variety of things. So does financial breakdown mean you simply want to understand how much money is going through each DSP or is going through biddable? Or does it mean that you want to understand the technology breakdown from a macro and micro lens? So when I came on board to Kimberly-Clark, this is one of the first things that I did. And I also did this exercise when I was on the Nestle side, but I learned so much via Nestle about how to make it stronger for Kimberly-Clark. And what I learned mostly was, it's so important to align objectives. What are we trying to accomplish out of this transparency exercise? And what we were trying to accomplish is, what are the opportunities to optimize the way that we're doing our operations? And to get there, we wanted to break down very granularly what we're spending money on in essentially as granular as you can get without log level data.
So I imagine hearing all this and kind of newer to the role in the last year or so, there's an element of education work that needs to be done across the org, right? So that everything you said makes total sense, but are the people that are actually day-to-day doing this type of work, are they enabled? Are they upskilled, right? I think is the word you've used, to be in a position to ask those kinds of questions.
Absolutely. And upskilling, I consider to be a bookend on every initiative that I run. And I like to think about upskilling by trying to put myself in the shoes of the other person's role or function. So what do they need to know to be more successful in their role? And that's going to be a very different answer if it's a brand manager versus a CFO versus a CMO. What do they need to understand to be more successful? So what I've found over the past few years is that if you're talking about programmatic, one of the best ways to upskill people is to compare it to marketplaces. It operates very similarly to the stock market. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. To the stock market. And it has buyers, it has sellers, it has intermediaries. And if you're speaking to executives or brand managers, this is a great way to explain it because they're all invested in the stock market. Okay. Everyone has read how the stock market works. They've upskilled themselves on that. So if you're using a metaphor that is already understood, it's a great way to explain it. And, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten the question from various different roles, internal and external, on can we just cut SSPs? Can we just cut that cost? And once you take a step back and explain how they're an intermediary and it works similar to the stock market, people really start to understand. And even better, if you do it through an immersive experience. So I'll give a bit of an example, but before I go into that, I think it's worth mentioning that if this topic is of interest to you, my boss who will be speaking next, Brad Moranchek, and I were two of the lead co-writers on an ANA white paper on programmatic supply transparency that will be rolled out at Cannes. And there will be 4 sessions this summer, explicitly for CMOs, walking through how it works.
Little plug,
just a little plug on that. But honestly, I think it'll be very helpful to many organizations. And so, if you're thinking about upskilling, what I've found is interactive methodologies work best. People learn by doing. And so one of the things that I did on the Nestle side is I had the pleasure of getting to travel across the world, go to different countries and work with the brand managers in those countries and teach them about digital. And one of the things that we did is we conducted a bidding game. And the objective of the bidding game was so that they understood that the value that the media agency is putting on the tactic, on the format, on the audience significantly impacts their reach. And for Nestle and Kimberly-Clark, reach is one of the most important media objectives. And so we walked through like the first price and second price auction by doing it interactively. So we had each brand represent a brand that was non-Nestle. It might have been Coca-Cola, Colgate. So thank you to some of you that work at these companies. And they were given 20 generic audiences, moms, students, etc. They were given a fake $1 million and they allocated that budget. And they decided what they wanted to bid based on an average CPN. And from there, once that whole component was done, there would be a wall of the audiences and each of the teams would go up, they would place their bids on that audience, and then we would show the winner of first price and the second highest bidder. And we would then calculate and show the difference of the scale based on first price versus second price. And this really helped them to understand how very supposedly tactical things that is the media agency's accountability is actually important to discuss as a part of the partnership to align the objective of the value that you're willing to put on reaching these individuals.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it can be a lot of this work, right? Especially as people are becoming more familiar now or probably more sophisticated from a programmatic standpoint. The interactivity is just a simple way to learn, right? And it kind of resonates more easily. You touched a little bit about, I don't want to say kind of auditing partners, but in your transparency, explorations. What about getting kind of ahead of that, right? Not necessarily an existing partner. I know I think yesterday you told me you were in the midst of this big global RFP and you were too busy to talk to me, which is fine. But I guess
I wasn't. I made it happen.
You've had a lot of experience kind of doing this work. And I think any advice or suggestions for folks in the room on, asking the right questions up front of their potential partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say I never thought I would be, in kindergarten, never thought I'd be an expert on global RFPs. I think I'm pretty close to there on the 10,000 hour rule. So I've now conducted, I think I'm on my 7th global RFP. And so there's some things that I've really learned along the way. So as the buzzword of this is objective, one of the most important things is to align objectives up front. So if we go through the example lens of DCO, dynamic creative optimization technology, if you're conducting a DCO RFP, what are you trying to achieve with that technology? Now, on the Kimberly-Clark end, we're trying to achieve 2 things with DCO, 2 macro buckets: message personalization in an automated way and creative agility at scale. And so if we were conducting a DCO RFP, all of our questions should go towards those 2 objectives. And the right providers for those 2 objectives might not be the right provider for a company that's doing D2C, trying to drive more sales and optimize to that. It's likely going to be a different partner. So the first thing I would recommend is align objectives. What are you trying to do? Build the structure of the RFP around that in terms of the questions, in terms of the vendors you're surveying, in terms of the scorecard. The second thing I would recommend is the scorecard should always align to the structure of the questions. And that might seem obvious, but it can get a bit away from you, and it should be as simple as possible. The third thing I would recommend, and this is especially for big companies, is to take more time on the front end to enable a more expedient implementation and the ability to bring to life the envisioned use cases. So for big organizations, really think about who should be using this technology, and not only who should be using this technology as the number one function, but who could also benefit from it, even if they're not yet using it. And give them visibility on the RFP, invite them to participate, and help guide them through it. Even if they're not the expert on the technology at this juncture, by participating in the RFP, they start to become an expert and they start to get inspired of what's possible, the art of the possible. And it's hugely educational and really helps that when you select a partner, then you're already able to have all these people on board who are excited about
Right.
bringing these use
You're
cases
saying like the
to
end
life.
user is actually involved further
Mhm.
up, so they involved in the decision-making process. There's some autonomy that comes with that once you move forward, and they're already ready to hit the ground running.
Exactly. And I would say some people in this room, on the technology side, well know that my RFPs always include a ton of people and are very comprehensive, but it's all to serve that larger purpose of that it's not a tactical experience. It's really pulling through to bring the vision to life across the board and connecting the dots.
Okay. So I know it was an example. You were talking about DCO partners in the RFP process, and you kind of did already define it technically by the acronym, what the letters represent. But what is kind of the broader definition, either for you personally or the business, of how you all are at least thinking of DCO? What does it kind of mean under the hood?
So I think that there's a misnomer on DCO that the singular objective of the technology is to bring message personalization to life. Creative scale and agility is a huge feature and benefit of these technologies. And underneath that, there's a couple different things that we're looking at Kimberly-Clark of bringing to life. So it's using the technology in an automated way to extend reach by automating the production of new sizes for display and video. It's using the technology for automated creative optimization. And we actually were even able to influence a few of the different providers on both the DCO and ad verification side. So on connecting those two pipes so that we could bring automated creative optimization to life for attention metrics rather than historical proxy metrics. So if that's of interest to you, talk to your respective partners. I can't share more on the partnerships because it's a bit confidential at this state, but talk to each of them. And the third part of it would be rapid optimization and testing. And so bringing that to life through the DCO lens. And all of these use cases can be incredibly valuable based on, again, what are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve?
So I was going to ask if from your perspective or that of the business, really, do you see, or Kimberly-Clark, do you really see DCO as a specific tactic, like that perspective on it? This is something tactical that we're employing, or should it be thought of more broadly or just more strategically, I guess?
That's a great question. So from my perspective, treating DCO as a tactic is actually one of the biggest errors in this space. It shouldn't be a tactic. It shouldn't be something that's added on once the creative production is done, once the media plan is done, as something essentially a shiny. It should really be thought about of how can you bring the brand story to life in a more meaningful way by using this technology to trigger new creative experiences or using this technology to automate the delivery in some way. How does the technology help to achieve either the campaign objective or bring the brand story to life in a better way? Automate, bring agility to life, whatever it is. And it should be infused throughout the standard campaign orchestration process when it's relevant, but it shouldn't be a last minute tactic added on.
Are there any other kind of missteps or things that you've seen that people could kind of improve upon, and or like biggest opportunity to kind of merge those thoughts together, like challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, I would say one of the big opportunities two of the big opportunities is to go beyond display. And there's a misnomer that DCO is only for display. It's still highly used for retargeting. which is only going to decrease as a potential activation tactic with the continuing diminishment of the cookie. So looking at other formats and thinking, how can you bring DCO to life for audio, for video, for mobile, for immersive different formats like through Teads or through other providers. The second thing I would say is thinking about the different ways that you can activate relevant experiences or triggers, such as I think contextual is a hugely interesting way. So like, what can you activate based on what video, what's the theme of the video someone is watching? Or what can you activate based on just the content that someone is reading to make it more relevant to them? And I think that this can be very powerful and interesting, but there's a bit of, I would say, an industry gap of upskilling a lot of our partners to change manage on all the different things that need to change across creative processes, media processes, and internally to really bring this to life in a meaningful way. And every time I've gone about it, it's truly a change management exercise.
So we've got a handful of minutes left, but a couple last ones. Do you want to touch on measurement, what that looks like from a DCO perspective, how to evaluate if this is working or not, the way you intended it to? Anything to say there?
So not trying to back out of this one, but I used to be very bullish on saying, this is how you measure something, but I truly do believe at this point it's different for each company. So there's a couple different ways you can go about it. You could measure how does it change and consumer engagement and attention metrics. You can measure how does it change ROI. You can measure the ROI of the technology. Each of these are right for different companies. Each of these can be configured in different ways, but it really matters, how does your company look about measurement? And it matters, what is important, again, not to be a broken record, is to align the success criteria. What does success look like? And make sure that everyone is on the same page with a singular primary KPI. And then you can, of course, also have secondary ones that you're looking at as well to judge success.
So final question before questions from the audience, if there are any, if they're still with us. Innovation, kind of what are you excited about, either in terms of new technologies, formats, channels, that sort of thing, or even just kind of different ways of doing things that you're enthusiastic about?
So what I'm really enthusiastic about, and people who know me well in the industry know this quite well, is about the power of ad verification technology and the different use cases that can be activated in regards to how can the data generated be used for planning, buying, insights into planning for both creative and media. I think there's a huge opportunity to take it further and to really think about how can that same technology be used to power creative decisioning. And so I'm super pumped about these alphas that are happening with the ad verification providers in partnership with the DCO providers. And there's so many other things that's going to be possible about the using the semantic technology with these providers to understand the emotive quality of a page. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? I think there's so many different use cases that haven't been done yet. So like, for example, taking corporate communication strategy on sustainability and bringing it to life through these providers by targeting contextual pages. There's so much there that is what I'm really excited to help bring to life for Kimberly-Clark.
That's it for us, guys.
That's all, folks.
We did it. We got through it. Any questions from the audience? We'd love to know. All righty. I think we're good, Rachel. We did it.
We're done.
They don't have any questions. I think you answered everything. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.